Hey dudes, it's Lerald. Over the last couple of days, GGG has dropped a series of teasers that all led up to a huge reveal for the next PoE 1 patch, and there's really a lot to unpack here. So this video is going to be a little bit of a breakdown of the teasers, and then also some reckless speculation bingo board stuff about what I think is going to be in the patch versus, what I want to be in the patch, kind of a wish list of things I'd like to see. So let's just go ahead and get into it. And I'll start with the first teaser here. This was dropped over a week ago, and people looked at it and kind of noticed there's some ink blotches and stuff. It didn't really have Zana's voice. People kind of speculated, what if this is Zana? But some of the lines, the text here, for the first time in my life, I found meaning, purpose. A path revealed itself, winding inexorably toward the Atlas. That doesn't exactly sound like Zana. And there was no evidence of anything Zana related, but that of course was the first thing people speculated about. So we can turn up the brightness and stuff too in Photoshop here and kind of see this is clearly just lorem ipsum text over here on the left. It's out of focus, quiz, ipsum, just that generic Latinish placeholder stuff. However, there's one thing that I didn't really see a lot of people talking about. This is a sextant down here in the bottom left corner here. This is a nautical sextant, a tool that sailors use to measure, I don't know, angles or whatever. I'm not a sailor myself. So then we got the second teaser, kind of the same deal, right? Except now it has some of those. If I take the, turn the layer and brightness adjustment layers off there real quick, you can see some of Zana's rose petals. And then you can see, of course, over here, everybody immediately on the Reddit was locked in on this. Expansion, name, reveal this week. And novice, which is apparently Latin for ship or boat, right? And I think that combined with the nautical sextant is a nice bit of bait, maybe, teasing that this is going to be a boat league. For the millionth time in a row, we're being told boat league, right? But then we kind of have some very, in the actual body of the text here, threads, impressions, realities woven from memory and yet not quite right. This sounds very much like Synthesis 2.0. Very, very influenced by Synthesis. Each one feels designed but distorted. Is this how the originator hides their work? That is sort of the premise here, right? I must follow it to find the originator. The originator hides their work in memories. Very much influenced by Synthesis, which was a league that didn't go core, one of the very few leagues in the history of PoE that didn't go core. So scrolling back all the way through the PoE wiki, all the way back to 2014, so many of these have gone core, bestiary, etc. But Synthesis was one of the few. So for those who didn't play Synthesis, the basic premise of it, there are the synthesized maps that still exist in the game, so you can kind of get a feel for the aesthetics. But in terms of the actual gameplay, you would find areas inside of your maps, you would run them, you kind of had a limited amount of time to get through them before the memory would collapse. And the goal was to try and collect that. Basically, you would clear through a little map area, then you would collect them and you would be able to assemble them in this big, sort of like a Carcassonne memory board. It was very complicated, and people who liked it really liked it, but I think the average player found it to be pretty overwhelming. So anyways, then we got a couple of days ago, we got this big reveal. They dropped this trailer that I'll just hit play on. I have downloaded it here.
These worlds are endless, and yet they are a prison. Help me find the originator.
All right, so obviously cool, good voice acting, all of that. So many more bits of teasing that Zana is gonna in some way be associated with all of this. We got the one rose petal here. Zana, major lore character up until a couple of years ago when she kind of got fed up with what had happened in the story, or disillusioned or whatever, and abandoned everybody and disappeared. And we've always known that was their plan at the time anyway, that she was going to come back at some point, and it does seem like she's going to be coming back now. I think this little explosion of rose petals is just very cool, as it says secrets, secrets, and then fades in the rest of the title, Secrets of the Atlas. That's the reveal of the expansion. So my takeaway from this, the fact that they said expansion rather than league, I think a lot of people have taken this to mean that it is going to be a full-scale in-game revamp. Generally speaking, when they talk about a league, they talk about a league, right? And when it's an expansion is technically sometimes they'll use that same language to just describe Legion, Blight, Delirium, but usually when the word Atlas is in there along with an expansion, it is something like the Conquerors of the Atlas expansion, which redesigned the entire in-game, or Echoes of the Atlas, which added the Maven, redesigned the entire in-game. Siege of the Atlas added the current in-game that we have right now, with Eater and Exarch both being in the game. So I think that it's pretty safe to assume that we're getting a full-scale in-game rework. You know, there's some like cool visuals in here as well. This particular like compass point visual is something that we've seen on a lot of the like splash art that they've done for these different, you know, War for the Atlas, Conquerors of the Atlas. They've had that kind of like compass point splash art there. So I'm expecting that this is a full in-game rework in addition to a challenge league also happening at the same time. So, you know, just like scaling up the brightness and playing around with the brightness and stuff, we can kind of do the same thing in Premiere. That's why I did this in Premiere rather than just like opening up the YouTube of it. So like just to kind of like really zoom in on this guy's face a bit here, which, you know, I might have the brightness a little too high, but like just to get a decent look at his face, like that is actually a face. I thought initially just looking at it in the like, you know, zero brightness, zero contrast, the rim lighting there, it just kind of looked like a mask. But yeah, that's definitely a face. He kind of looks like Venarius. A little bit. Like, I don't know that he is Venarius, but he does look a little bit like Venarius. He has some of the same like kind of flowing robes going on. Obviously, Venarius that we met in Synthesis League, quite a bit older, so maybe there's some sort of time traveling component going on here. You know, don't really know. This could just be a brand new guy, right? There's no way to know until we actually get in and play it, but there's definitely some interesting like implications. I think there were some people thinking he might be the Shaper, but I don't think he looks like the Shaper. His voice acting doesn't sound anything like a younger version of the Shaper. Didn't really see any overlap with him being the Shaper. These swirly tendrils, though, seem very Elder influenced, so I do think this is going to be really like doubling down on all of the Eldritch stuff that we've had over the years in the in-game of PoE, and it's certainly like my favorite aspect of the storytelling is the Shaper and Elder story, the Eater and Exarch story. Those are my favorite kinds of bits of storytelling that happen in this game. Then the other big takeaway here is just simply that they already gave us the like reveal date and the expansion or the league launch date, June 13th, right? 4 p.m. EST or EDT, 1 p.m. PDT, some other different time if you live in Europe or Australia or you know, somewhere else throughout the globe. But yeah, cool. So we know when it is. We have a vague idea of what it is. And so I cooked up a little bingo board just based on the things that I'd like to see and I kind of expect to see. So some of these are just things that like I'm confident are going to be happening in PoE 1 at some point, and I think probably now because they've happened recently in PoE 2. So the first one, Breach Splinters all dropping at once. I feel confident about that. Strongboxes and Essences getting a UI element, like you walk up to an Essence and you have Remnants of Corruption in your bag, you'll be able to just click on a little icon right next to the Essence instead of opening your bag and then right-clicking it and then clicking the monster, and you know. Those are like little quality of life improvements that I think will just be in the game for like going forward, which is great. Another one that I didn't put in this little bingo board here that I would love to see is like pausing, and then also just like WASD support. That is something that Jonathan has talked about, the pausing and the WASD stuff that obviously works in PoE 2 and it's not a thing in PoE 1 yet. The way he made it sound is that WASD and pausing are more likely an inevitability than like a chance, but probably something that'll take all the way through the end of PoE 2 actually coming out into full release, and then they'll go back and be able to re-add it back into PoE 1. Okay, like I said, new in-game Atlas system, I think that's a pretty much a foregone conclusion, and so because of that, we're going to get new boss fights. This happens every single time we get a new in-game. You can look at the current in-game if I can get to the right page here. Siege of the Atlas added Exarch and Eater, but then it also added what are their names? Infinite Hunger and Black Star. So that's 4 bosses. Echoes of the Atlas added Maven, and then all of the different types of Maven Rota fights, right? Multi-boss fights. So that was like 6 fights, technically speaking, sort of. Conquerors of the Atlas added 5, Cirrus, and then the other 5 Conquerors. So I would expect that we're going to get 3 to 6 fights. I'm guessing 5. I also think this means we're going to get some sort of new Atlas passive tree. Maybe faster unlocks would be cool, right? Like not having to do every single one of the maps that's on the Atlas would be pretty great, or at least to unlock the majority of the points. I mean, I think the Atlas passive tree has worked really well as it is, but if it were a little bit faster to unlock, that wouldn't be a bad thing. I also think we might see more expansion of Tier 17 maps. They were really brutally hard when they first came out 2 leagues ago, and then they got nerfed somewhat then, and then they kind of got buffed back up a little bit going into the current league, Settlers, which has lasted for so long now. But they did get nerfed kind of partway through Settlers, I guess fairly early on at this point, but they did get nerfed in Settlers League. I really don't think they're so bad. I like the idea of Tier 17 maps a lot now, and I think seeing them expanded out to more maps would be pretty cool. But the current reward structure of clearing a Tier 17 map and getting Uber Boss keys, especially if they were to remove some of those Uber Bosses or do something with those Uber Bosses to make them a little bit more obscure, they might have something else. We might have Tier 17s might be the way that we unlock the like high-end versions of new in-game boss fights. Who knows? Bit of a story beat. I think the Originator, pretty obvious name, right? We have the Elder. We have the Maven, we have the Exarch, we have the Eater. I feel like it makes sense just grammatically that the Originator would be the one that created all of them. Maybe not, maybe it created the Atlas of Worlds. Bit of a story guess, but I'm guessing that it created all of them and it's part of some like Eldritch firmament. Okay, new item influence types. I think this is also like something that's definitely going to happen. I think kind of related to the next point, Eater and Exarch currencies are probably going to become very rare. You look at the way that like Hunter exalted orbs are kind of rare in the game after the point at which Conquerors of the Atlas was no longer like the primary form of content, especially like now, we're multiple in-games on from that. I think the same thing is going to happen with those two currencies. I think that their altars will probably just completely not exist anymore, or maybe they'll be part of like a special mod for maps. Maybe there'll be a new piece of content that you can like have occur as a proc. Another story beat, I do think that the guy is like Venarius somehow, maybe some sort of time travel angle going on there. But yeah, I think we're going to have like new item influence types to contend with Eater and Exarch as like influence customizations, and then also Shaper and Elder. Again, all stuff I could be wrong about, but I think I feel pretty good about this stuff in the top half of the tree, kind of like decreasing confidence as we go further down until we get to the like last one. I do feel pretty good about that. Okay, sextants being in these two images, I feel like sextants are going to return, but I don't think they're going to return in the way that they did before, where sextant rolling was like extremely tedious, but also extremely rewarding. I think they'll be back in like name only, like some sort of additional map customization mechanism, but more along the line of scarabs rather than a horrible thing that you sit and roll on void stones. I also think Zana as a boss fight's a real possibility. We've seen so many hints at Zana between this teaser and then this moment right here in the trailer where it says secrets. Awesome editing on the trailer, awesome music on the trailer too. Just really, really knocking it out of the park on this little teaser here. Definitely got me teased. We could have Zana come in as like a horrible, sad boss fight. She could show up and help us in a boss fight. It could be a situation where, like it was with Venarius in Synthesis League, where we're talking with an NPC for a while, we think they're an ally, then it turns out they're an enemy, and Zana shows up and saves the day. So, could be any of those. I'm kind of angling more toward her being a boss now. So they revealed the expansion, right? But they didn't actually reveal the league. Now it's possible that we just get this as the league and that's it. But I think it's also a very real possibility that we just get some sort of like small farming league mechanic. I would love a fall league mechanic. Right now it is like close to 100 degrees outside already. We're not even into June. Yeah, some sort of smaller league mechanic that's like a farming oriented thing. Like I hesitate to say Affliction because that league was so incredibly lucrative, but it wasn't actually all that difficult to set up and do. It was obviously mechanically very complex to truly understand it, but we've had other leagues. Sentinel League is maybe a good example of one that I guess also had a lot of depth and complexity, but at its most basic, you kind of just zoned into maps and blasted. And I think the possibility of something like that being coupled with a redesigned in-game is pretty decent. Okay, so there's boat stuff in here as well. Was there anything boat related in this? I don't think so, but there were the sextants, and then of course there's the word navis in this. I think it's probably bait. I've gotten my hopes up a couple of times about there being boats. I don't really care if there are boats, right? But it would be fun if there were. People have wanted boats for a long time. I'm thinking bait. Okay, this next several things are just like me wish casting. This is just stuff I would like to see. Torment removed and Abyss removed. I think they're my two least favorite mechanics in the game. And if we go back and look at leagues, Torment has been in the game since 2014. Not a fan. I just don't think it's very good as a mechanic. Abyss has been in since 2017. I think Abyss, when it works, it's usually because it's working incorrectly. People are like, not necessarily bugging it, although maybe, but they're using Abyss to spawn just like literally thousands of monsters in each map. And when you're playing it correctly, you're just following the line around and killing the stuff that comes out very quickly. Kind of boring. So I wouldn't mind if Abyss League just got, buried forever. And I would really love to see them bring back Trial of the Ancestors. I love Trial so much. I also think just killing Abyss and like bringing Exarch and Eater in as like a thing that you can spec into is also a cool idea. And then Sentinel, Affliction, and Calandra, to a lesser extent, maybe being stuff that you can actually emphasize showing up on the Atlas passive tree. Again, going back to that league table for the millionth time here. They made it in Settlers League that Sentinels, Calandra, mirror things, and not mirrors of Calandra, but the like reflections that'll have a couple of horrible pieces of gear in them that you can choose between. And then the Affliction Wildwood, like those can randomly show up in your maps. And I think just like a simple choice node in the Atlas passive tree where you can go like 100% increased chance of finding a Sentinel, 50% reduced chance of finding Affliction or Calandra, like just, a choice node that has basically all the three permutations of that. Would be awesome. I would love to find Sentinels in every single map. That would be pretty great. And then I love Trial of the Ancestors. They just put so much time and effort. Really good like art and like voice acting and stuff on display in Trial of the Ancestors. It was, if I look back at this table of leagues, it's like if I could pick any of these leagues to last forever, it's probably Affliction League and then Sentinel League. But then once I go further down, it's like, I think Ancestor League might be in the top 5 of all the leagues that I would want to last for, at this point we're over 300 days. I think it was 300 days when they announced the Secrets of the Atlas. They dropped the Secrets of the Atlas reveal teaser video. And yeah, Settler League, definitely not my favorite, definitely not the one that I would want to last for 300 days. But Trial of the Ancestors, I think I would have actually enjoyed more. So I do think gold has been a real success in Settler League. I think the trade tool, the trade, whatever it's called, the trade market, like that has been amazing. So I think those are definitely going to go core. I think people expected that before they were even released, though. King's March, on the other hand, not core. I don't want it to go core. I've built the farm enough times for a lifetime. I think it's pretty, and I think we'll see it in PoE 2, and I think the artwork is good, but I don't ever want to build a town ever again. Svalin, though, and, some of the uniques from this league, those should go core. I think those were cool. I think the boss fights were actually kind of lackluster. I think they were maybe my, least favorite league-related boss fights, so I wouldn't care if those didn't go core. But if they did, that would be fine too. And then, finally, down here at the end, I just have some vague balance expectations. I think Slayer and Trickster will both probably be nerfed. If we look at PoE Ninja real quick, builds, they're obviously the top two ascendancies. It's really, with the league lasting as long as it has, people have gotten experimental and played weird stuff out here. But, these are two clearly much stronger than everything else. Hyro also kind of in that same vein. I really don't think that the balance 17% for the most played ascendancy. It's been worse, but I think they could probably stand to get a nerf just because Trickster is so good at literally everything it does. It's tanky and it's just really good at adding damage and being very efficient across a wide variety of builds. So much so that it's kind of sucking up the oxygen for some other ascendancies that I really like Assassin has always been one that I really like. And there's just no reason to play it as long as Slayer is as good as it is. I also would just love to see Toxic Rain buffed. Please, GGG, please. Toxic Rain is definitely Been languishing in the last couple of leagues to the point that I didn't even play at this league, and it felt bad to do, but I didn't. And then, the most overperforming skills, Lightning Strike, Molten Strike of the Zenith specifically, and Power Siphon, Locust Mines, those could all stand to be nerfed. Specifically the Power Siphon Locust Mine interaction, just that has to go. It's so good that it's like criminal to not play it. And that's kind of a fun ruining thing, because obviously people would rather play other stuff than do that again. So I think it's pretty obvious that those are going to get nerfed. It would be nice if Toxic Rain got buffed. Not counting on that. That's probably the least likely of all the things in this entire list, even more than like Assassin getting buffed or Abyss being removed for Tota. All right, so that's the big patch reveal. This is my wish list for 3.26. GGG did also announce a big PoE 2 patch is coming next week. They announced this, I think, on like Wednesday of this week. There are major changes to in-game content. There are also major changes to the reward structure for pretty much all of the in-game content, so that's going to be great as well. I expected a lot of these changes, buffing all of the in-game bosses and all of the different league mechanics. I just thought they would come in patch 0.3, so actually getting them a few months ahead of schedule in patch 0.21 is fantastic. It seems like everything's finally coming together. Like, this will be something to play around with a little bit while still getting ready for PoE 1's next big patch, and kind of getting hyped for that. Have something to play around with in PoE 2 as well. I'm pretty excited about the next big PoE 1 patch. I think you can tell. And I hope that GGG is reaching the point where they can smoothly transition between putting out new patches for each game on a consistent basis. That really is the number one thing I would like to see the company achieve, even more than any specific change made to either game. You could scrap the whole bingo board, right? If they were just able to consistently bounce back and forth between the two games to give us something for us ourselves to bounce back and forth between the two games every, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks, I would be really happy. And I think this is the start of that happening. All right, that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and you want to see more like it, and if you want to support us even further, consider becoming a channel member. Thanks for watching. Bye.